A couple weeks ago I was driving by a friend's house and I noticed that his neighbor was having some tree work done. So I mentioned to him that if his neighbor, had trouble looking for someone to get rid of the wood, I'd be more than happy to help out with the firewood. And I'm happy to say that I got a call from the neighbor, or I got a call from my friend who gave me the neighbor's number about a week ago and said that they would be okay with me taking some wood. So what I'm trying to do today is kind of get myself set up, get the saw sharpened, get everything ready. I blew off the air filter. I didn't use 90 pounds full wide open. I gently blew off the air filter, and I can get away with that because it's this wire mesh. If you have a flocked air filter, it's almost like a tissue on top of something. If you hit that with highly compressed air, you're going to knock it right off and lose the efficiency of your air filter. Or if you have some kind of paper one, I'm not really sure I'd recommend blowing it off. I like to think I take good care of my equipment, but there's something about chainsaws that I'm like extra special, I give them extra special care. If I've used the saw for more than a day, which is usually 4 or 5 tanks tops, I need to clean the air filter. I need to blow the thing off, I'll sharpen it. There's just something about chainsaws that I feel a need to give them some extra TLC. Because there's just nothing better than a chainsaw that's running right, in my book. Always make sure you push down on the tip of your bar when you're tightening your bar. You want that tip to be up. Some guys will say tighten them so you can pull them without the saw moving. I usually go a little tighter than that. I built this stand, I don't know, maybe 3 years ago. And I gotta say, it's the most awesome thing I think I've done around the yard. It is so nice to have this saw just where I want it when I'm sharpening it. We're gonna go ahead and just touch up the edge on this chain. I touch up my chain every tank of gas. Usually when I'm cutting wood that's been felled on the ground, rolled through the mud, and it's just got a lot of sand and dirt on it, so it dulls quickly. Yeah, I could probably make it 2 tanks of gas. I just enjoy having a sharp chainsaw. We're gonna go ahead and mark the cutter where we're going to start sharpening. My techniques are constantly changing on how I sharpen chainsaws because I'm always learning new ways to do things. And I try new things, and sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. It should be filed with a 7/32 file, but because I'm just about halfway through the saw, I have moved down to a 13/64. Don't hold me to it, but I heard from an arborist, when your chain gets about halfway done, drop it 1 file size and you'll have better results. If you don't know the right angle, you can draw it on your vise. I have some magnets. I've gotten pretty good at getting close enough to the right angle. And then we'll just do 3 strokes on this side. But I'm not quite getting where I want to get it. You got to get it when you're filing. The most important thing to do is to look where the file touches the top of the cutter, and you want to see a nice straight line there. That's kind of how I gauge how I'm doing. So if you look there and you notice that your file, there's a gap, that means your file, you have to do a few more strokes to close the gap or move the angle. But if you also notice maybe sometimes that your file's back a little bit, that means that you're not taking enough out of the gullet. You got to get in that gullet there before you can get to the tip of the tooth. For me, 3 strokes on this side is usually enough for a maintenance sharpening. And then I'll take a look right down at the tooth, and these are magnifying safety glasses, and I'll just make sure that I've gotten the whole underside. I can, you can kind of see shiny metal all the way under the tooth. Sometimes you'll actually see, you'll get it from underneath and you can kind of see the metal kind of wear away. You'll see like a chunk of metal come because you're working from under. I used to use the Oregon depth gauge, which you have to lay on top of the teeth, kind of like this, and it's got a point, and then you file the top. The thing about the Oregon depth gauge is once you do the filing of the top, you have to then go back and round the teeth off. And you also need to lay the depth gauge on 2 different teeth to do the job. With the Husqvarna one, all you need to do is put it on top of the chain, let the chain poke through, and then file your teeth. I'm a die-hard believer in the Husqvarna depth gauge, and this is another one that I'm going to give Buck and Billy Ray Smith credit for. You know, I had to special order this. It took a while to come in, but I mean, I'll never go back because all I need for a day in the forest is right here. And I can keep this saw razor sharp. I can just bring the cutter all the way out, put my depth gauge tool on top, and then just work my way down. It goes very quickly. What I'll do now is I'll actually flip the saw over and make it easier to get to the other side. For a maintenance sharpening, you know, every tank of gas, if I haven't hit a rock, I'll do 3 strokes on this side, but only 2 strokes on this side, because for whatever reason, I end up pushing on the file harder on this side. So 2 strokes is all I need to do. I'm looking at the top of the file, and I just want to make sure I've got good contact with the top of the file and the tooth there. And I'm holding my file pretty much at a 90-degree angle. Always gets awkward on one side. 4 strokes might be a bit much. My depth gauges may end up being too low. I would say I wouldn't do more than 2 strokes at a time if you're new at this. The deeper your depth gauge is, the more grabby your saw is going to be, and the more likely it's going to kick back. This chain is razor sharp and ready to go. The saw cuts great, but I did take the depth gauges a little bit too low. I probably should have stopped at 2 or maybe 3 strokes. I think I did 4 on one side. It's a little bit grippy and it's going to be more likely to kick back. I just have to keep that in mind tomorrow. Well, good morning there, guys. We're at the deli right now, and I'm just having bacon, egg, and cheese. Got it on Portuguese. That way you don't have those little black things in your teeth all day. So I got the truck all loaded, we're ready to go. I spoke to my friend who's a neighbor of the person whose house we're going to. He said there's about a dump truck load of wood left. I don't really know what size dump truck. Somebody else came and took some wood as well. So we'll just head over there and see how we make out, see what's there. It's right next to the road, it's oak, it's good wood. There's nothing wrong with going out and getting some firewood. Well, I finished my first tank of gas, and so far so good. I think it'll take probably another tank to get through till around here, and then, you know, there's this stuff over here which I'm gonna have to cut into smaller pieces to get in the truck. Saw's been cutting great. You know, I was concerned about my depth gauges being too low, and maybe because it's smaller wood, but I mean, the saw is definitely on today. Here's what we got in the truck so far. So again, this is 1 tank of gas. Chainsaws make a lot of dust. You're kind of in the moment cutting, you don't notice it, then you turn the saw off and you end up covered in dust. Ridiculous. I do keep a stump vise in my toolbox here, and I thought that there was going to be a log at a good height for sharpening to put this in, but I don't really see that. So I think we're just going to go old school to sharpen this one. And you know, I'd rather sharpen at a comfortable height than to have the saw, you know, down low on the ground and have to bend over all the time. So I'm just going to take the saw, put it on the tailgate, and rest it on a piece of wood here. And one thing I need to do before I start is just mark a cutter, because if I don't, I end up sharpening it like 3 times. So this is by no means as precise as using the vise that I was using, but in a pinch, you know. And we're just going to do, this side is usually 3 strokes. And I'm just trying to keep that file parallel to the cutting edge and put a little pressure going back. And it's just not biting like it does on the vise. You know, I haven't hand filed off one of my vices in a while. But hopefully that'll be enough to keep the edge, you know. And again, I think I mentioned in the beginning of the video, I'm looking at where the file touches the tooth, and I want to have a nice clean line there. I don't want to see it in different directions or a space. So if you see me go a few more strokes, it's usually because I'm not getting that clean line, which I don't seem to be getting at all on this guy. There you go, there's a clean line. And, you know, again, I get a lot of guff in one of my videos where I say that I sharpen every tank. But I couldn't imagine not sharpening every tank. Because while the saw is cutting perfectly fine, I can tell it's duller than it was when I started. So why would you not just take a few minutes to touch up the edge? Again, this one's a little bit off. Boy, it's really awkward doing this one-handed, and I'm sure it's not as precise either. You know, and this is where sometimes in the videos I say every 3 sharpenings are minor sharpenings, and then by the time you get to the 4th or the 5th, it's more of a major sharpening. I mean, I can tell you right now that I am by no means as precise doing this one-handed on the back of a truck as I am in the vise. And these cutters aren't going to be the same when I'm done today. So going back to the vise to really get my angles right, get my tooth, you know, the same teeth, the same length, that's going to be a difference. Now, how are we going to do the other side? I'm going to do the whatever works, and I'm going to kind of lean over the saw here, and you guys probably can't see much, but I think I'm due for a new file too. Kind of got my finger, you know, I'm just making this up as I go, guys. I don't do this all the time, but I got my finger resting on the file. It allows me to put a lot more pressure. And we're not going to worry about the depth gauges because we just did the depth gauges yesterday, so they're going to be fine. I'm going to hold on to this piece of wood in case I need it again. Okay guys, I'm going to take 5 and then we'll fire the saw up again. Okay guys, that's where we are after 2 tanks of gas. Just got a little bit more to go there. It's about 3.5 hours later. We cleaned everything up. If I had to guess, I'd probably call that a solid 2 cords. Maybe a little bit over 2 cords by the time all is split. And I really like the fact that it's smaller size logs, so I can, you know, just pick them off the pile and split them at my leisure, unlike the monsters I've got over there. So guys, that's gonna do it for today. And I just had I had a few thoughts and a few things I just want to share with you at the end of this video. The first one was I've been trying to learn to shoot video manual. So any shots that were overexposed, underexposed, out of focus, just didn't look right. My fault. Hopefully that'll get better as things go, but you gotta learn, and I figure I might as well just go ahead and learn now. The other thing I was thinking about, you know, when I was near the end of the first tank of gas, you know, and maybe it was just I was on a job site where they had an excavator, they had a bobcat, a tracked bobcat, and then they had a air chisel, air hammer, impact hammer going. There was a lot going on over there, and I was pushing a little bit harder than I really thought I, you know, should be pushing. But the thought that kind of came to me was, you know, I just don't know how arborists and lumberjacks do it, where you're out in the woods all day with a chainsaw, because, like, you know, using a chainsaw, man, you better be paying attention, and you better be ready for whatever comes, because if something goes wrong, it's going to go wrong really quick. And it's almost like, you know, especially the arborists I see, man, those guys, they go. I mean, they're all big guys, and it's almost like you run a sprint and you get your pulse up, and then you got to, you know, use a precision tool that with one wrong move is going to, you know, hurt you pretty bad. And I guess that's just my, you know, my thought of the day, or my thought as I was working today. And you know, I wore my chaps today, and I, you know, tried to be pretty careful. And speaking of safe, the one thing I wanted to talk about, but I got kind of off track with all the stuff going on, is, you know, one of the times for me that I find using a chainsaw is the most dangerous is when you're cutting on a pile like I was today, because what'll happen is the tip of that bar, you know, it's the top. If you take your chainsaw bar and cut it in half and do, you know, from the halfway point to 90 degrees at the tip, if you hits that part of the bar into something, you know, a piece of wood, a rock, stick, anything, that saw is going to shoot up. You know, that's what creates kickback. So when you're cutting on a pile, quite often you'll be kind of having that bar into the pile and not see what's back there. And if you catch something, that saw is going to come at you. And if your depth gauges are too low, like I alluded to, my depth gauges may have been too low, you know, it's going to come back faster. If you're using a non-safety chain, the yellow chains, which don't have anti-kickback stuff, are going to kick back much faster than the green chains, which have the anti-kickback stuff. So that's just one thing is, you know, well, it's like, oh, cool, a pile of wood, it's all straight logs. You got to keep your guard up when you're cutting, because in my life, the times I've had kickback happen the worst have been on piles like that one. And I guess that's it. I can't think of anything else I was going to say. So thanks for watching, folks. I don't know, you know, what this series turned into. I hope you enjoyed watching it. And I guess I just want to thank you guys. You know, I just really enjoy cutting wood. I don't know why. I really enjoy sharpening chainsaws. And I just want to thank you guys for sharing my passion in this little series. Take care.